I have some really big news. I just got off the phone with the Adam Silver, and he is letting us fix the NBA. He called me up and said, "Hey, Will, the NBA is in a good spot, but it's not quite where we want to be. What can we do to change it?" And I said, "I agree. I think the NBA is in a great spot. But if you want to turn it into a great spot, here's what you need to do." And so I told him I have 5 things in particular that I think he needs to change right now. So if you're Adam Silver watching this, here you go. Here's what I think you should do. If you're not Adam Silver, you can still watch. Let me know what you think. If there's another rule change I missed, put those down in the comments. But here we go with the 5 rule changes I think the NBA should make. Starting off kind of easy with the first couple. These are day one changes that I think should be made. Towards the end, we'll get to some more out there rule changes. But let's start easy. And that is make the jersey rules more coherent. And I know that this isn't a on the court rule change. We will get to some actual on the court stuff in the other rules, but I think this is something that has to change. And I'm going to go on my little mini jersey rant right now. You might not agree, but I think this has to be a day one change. I think this has to be fixed in the NBA. I am someone like probably a lot of you that watch a lot of NBA, not only playoffs, big games, but also just random league pass nights. And even though I watch a lot of games, I can never really tell what jerseys are what. And if there are rules, if it's not, if it's just 2 random jerseys that teams pull out. And even from somebody who's watching most games, it seems like every other week a team's coming up with a new jersey. And I thought there was just really no rules until I looked them up for this video. And apparently there are. And there are 5 jerseys that are in the NBA for each team. There's the Association, which is their traditional home jersey. The Icon Edition, which is the traditional away. There's the Statement Edition, the City Edition, and the Classic Edition. So teams can only have those 5 jerseys. Not all teams have all 5. The Classic jerseys, I think only a few teams have. So there are rules around this. I, again, was thinking that teams were just coming up with jerseys. Seems like we got a new City or Statement Edition like every year. And while that is the case, there are some rules in place. But I think we have to be a lot smarter for the NBA. A lot of this is branding, and I get that. A lot of it is money related, and I get that. I'm not saying we should go down to just 2 jerseys, home and away. I get the point of all these jerseys is to improve your branding. It's to improve your sales. You put out a new jersey every year. People are going to buy, even if it's not necessarily me, but people are going to buy new jerseys as they come out. So I'm not saying to only have like 2 jerseys, but I think we have to be smarter of how we do this. I'm all for 4 or 5 different jerseys. I'm all for putting in different additions. I'm all for changing it up every year, but we have to do this smarter. And so what I'm proposing is rule change number 1 within this first rule change. I think we need to go back to home whites. I think none of this like, hey, the home team gets to choose. No, I think the Association Edition, which is the traditional home whites, have to be worn at home. Some people may disagree with that. I think that should be the case. We should go back to how it was. And then the away jersey is the Icon Edition, as they call it, is the one based on the team's color. I think that's number 1. Number 2 is I'm okay with all these new editions. I'm okay with doing a City Edition, with doing some like old school classic editions. But we have to make it standard across the league. I'm tired of turning on a random game and just seeing 2 random jersey combinations. I think it should always be home whites, the Association Edition, and then the Icon Edition. That should be the standard. And then if you want to have themed weeks, and that's going to be part 2 of this rule change. I think we need themed weeks across the NBA. That way, not only are you getting extra jersey sales because you're putting in different jerseys, but you can also market it and you can brand it in a different way. Because imagine if next week, if the NBA was like, hey, this is Classics Week. We're going to do different marketing opportunities for, the old school teams. Every team is going to wear a classic jersey. Then that makes sense. And if I'm a fan, I know that every single game that I watch this week is going to have 2 classic jerseys. We can do some marketing on old teams, all that sort of stuff. And it just doesn't look like 2 random jerseys. And so I think we need themed weeks. We can have a classic week. We can have a city week. If you want to have all teams wear their city jerseys, if you want to do 2 city editions for each team, a home and away, I'm fine with that. But make it themed, because right now it's just random. It's random with the home whites versus not. It's random with just one team wearing a classic, one team wearing random. too much randomness. I think we need to hone it in. You can still use all the jerseys, but we got to hone it. So that was my long rant on the jersey rules. I do think it needs to be changed. This would be a day one thing for me. Rule change number 2 is more basketball related, and that is enforce the flopping rule and enforce the natural shooting motion rule that you already implemented. And this is another day one change. And it's a day one change because it's not even a rule change, because it's a rule that's already in place. And so I'm lumping these two together. These are still the kind of easy rule changes. Flopping and natural shooting motion. We've seen both of those get implemented the last few years. And both of them were enforced a lot, actually, when they were first introduced. And I think that was good for the game. And so I'm telling you, Adam Silver, we need that back, because a lot of the complaints in the NBA right now are offenses really taking advantage of how the game is called. And you tried to fix that. And I think you were on the right path with getting rid of flopping, with getting rid of, all these offensive players just jumping into the defender and getting a foul called that way. That's not basketball. And I think a lot of players in the modern NBA have really just taken advantage of it. And I don't necessarily think it's their fault. I think players like a James Harden, like a Trae Young, like, now an SGA or a Luka, yes, you can blame them. And a lot of people don't like those players because of what they do and how they play. But I don't think it's necessarily their fault. They're just taking advantage of the rules. And so because of that, I think we need to change some of these rules. And the good part is you've already done that. You just don't enforce it. And so I would say there should be strict penalties on flopping. You could kind of treat it like a delay of game warning. You can give the whole team a flopping warning if you want. If it happens again, it's a technical foul. And then the natural shooting motion, I would be really strict on this. I would say if it's an offensive player not going straight up, if they're leaning in, I don't think that's a foul. And I think we have to be really strict on that, because players like Luka, players like SGA take advantage of it. The players might not like it, but I think overall it would be good for the game. They will adjust, and fans will like it a lot more. So that is rule change number 2, which is not even changed because you already have it. Rule change number 3 is another one that's not necessarily on the court, but I think all reviews should be done remotely. You already have Secaucus in place. You already have a replay center offsite. And while I think reviews are good, and I think the challenge system you implemented, the idea that you can get a second challenge if you win the first one, I think that's good. But one of the complaints that NBA fans have is the length of these reviews, and the fact that we're always going to commercial, we're always just waiting for these reviews to happen. And it's not the fact that the fans don't want the call to be correct. They do. And I think all fans would agree. The replay system is good, especially when it's an important call. But I'm tired of the time it takes. And so I think the easiest way we can fix this is do what baseball does. Baseball, the umpires, they recognize that the challenge is happening. The offsite replay center, they handle it. The umpires are just standing there with their earpiece in and just standing and waiting. There's no time wasted of going up to the table, getting the screen all ready, announcing it, talking with the people there. By the time all of that happens, probably 95% of replays, we as fans who are watching the broadcast, we already know the result. And yet we're waiting for the refs to see it, to make sure they have the right call, to then look at the timing of it. Do they need to fix the clock? All of that is way too long. I think it should be, hey, challenge that automatically sets in the replay center. I think there should be 5 or 6 people in there at once looking at a call. Somebody's looking at the clock. Somebody's looking at the actual call. And this should be done in like 30 seconds to a minute. We don't need to waste time on it. The only good part of these reviews, honestly, is Bill Kennedy. I would be sad because we would lose Bill Kennedy's announcements. But for the most part, everything else is just way too long. So I think that's something that should change from day one. Now I have 2 more changes, and these are going to get a little bit more out there. I don't think they're too crazy, but I don't know if these are necessarily day one changes. I think these are changes you might want to marinate on, see if you like it, but I think they would ultimately be good for the NBA. So here we go with rule change number 4. I would eliminate intentional fouls when you are leading in a game. And I get that seems kind of random or a lot, but it basically would take away the strategy of fouling when you are ahead, and specifically fouling when you are up 3. Now, some people may disagree with this, and I know this is why it would take some time to think about, to kind of get opinions. The argument against that is, well, one is it's just the way it's always been. This would be a change in basketball, it would be a change in the NBA. And then two, it would take away strategy, and it would take away strategy from coaches, because there's a big debate. If you're up 3 with, say, less than 10 seconds left, do you foul, make them take only 2 free throws, or do you play it out, risk giving up a 3? And that's a valid debate. We can have that another time. I like the strategy of it, and that would be a downside of taking it away. However, we have seen too many games that have been great games, and great games all the way up until the end. It's a close game. Teams are going back and forth. And all of a sudden, it's just a free throw shooting contest. Because the team that's losing, they are obviously going to foul because they need to preserve the clock. They need to try to get the ball back. So if they're fouling teams and the winning team is shooting free throws, and then on the other side, the winning team is fouling the losing team and they're shooting free throws, all of a sudden what is a great game has just come to a standstill. And it's just a free throw shooting contest. And I think that's one of the biggest changes we can make to the end of games. Now, you could go a little bit more extreme. We could look at Elam endings. We could look at things like that. I think that's probably a little bit too much for right now. So that's why I'm saying taking away intentional fouls when you're up, because we want to see these players play. We don't want to see them at the free throw line. I think that's one change that should be considered. And then speaking of free throws being stuff that fans just don't want to see, I think this is the last change that I would really consider. Again, it's not necessarily an easy change, not a day one change, but I also don't think it's way out there. I think this could actually be considered over the next few years. And that is, you only take 1 free throw, no matter what the foul is, except for the final 2 minutes of the game. Then it goes back to regular. So this goes back to the idea that free throws, again, not the most exciting part of the game. Leagues like the MLB have looked at and done a lot of changes that kind of speed up the game, make sure there's not as many breaks. And I think free throws are the one thing that we can look at in the NBA. There's a lot of free throws just based on how the game is called. We talked about that earlier. Free throws are a part of the game, and I think you can't go too extreme and not call fouls. You have to have free throws. But I would do what the Unrivaled League is doing right now, the 3-on-3 women's league that has started the last couple of years. They only take 1 free throw, even if it's a 2-shot or a 3-shot. So then that way, if you attack the basket, you get fouled, you just get 1 free throw. And I would say, hey, none of this like slowly getting lined up. No, there's a foul, get lined up, there's 1 free throw. If you make it, you get 2 points. If you miss it, you get 0. So I think 2 things would happen. 1, free throws would be a lot more important, because if you're fouled on a 2, especially if you're fouled on a 3, you got to make your 1 free throw, because there's 1 shot that could potentially be worth 3 points. Big emphasis on free throws and making your free throws. And then 2, I think it would speed up the game. I don't really need to see a whole minute paused because somebody got fouled, takes 30 seconds to line up. They take their first one. There's like 20 seconds in between. We take another one. That's a whole minute that's wasted. And I think, again, going back to the MLB, it's similar to stuff MLB has done. And there was a lot of complaints. There was a lot of old school baseball people that didn't agree. And I think there would be a lot of old school NBA people who wouldn't agree and wouldn't like this. It would affect the stats, all of that. I get it. But if we're trying to make it a better flow and not get stopped by so many free throws, this is something that we should consider. And I say all that with the caveat that the last 2 minutes would go back to normal, because I think clutch, big free throws, you need to kind of be in those moments. A random second quarter foul, we don't need to stop for a minute to take 2 free throws. So that would be one change. That would be a lot, but I think we should consider. So those 5 changes, I think a few of them, day one, we have to do right now. Fixing the jersey rule, being a little bit more standard. 2, you got to enforce the flopping. You got to enforce the natural shooting motion. 3, all reviews done remotely. I get that's not an on-the-court change, but I think that would be an easy fix. And then a couple that are a little bit more out there, but I think would really make a difference in the NBA. And that's no more intentional fouls when you're up in the game. And then 1 free throw shot for all fouls up until 2 minutes. I think those 2 would really help the game. I get it's a lot, but I think it would. There are lots of other things that I could have brought up. I brought up the Elam ending, which is a really fun thing to consider, but we'll save that for later. I know a lot of people complain about the gather rule. I know a lot of people complain about defensive 3 seconds. Goaltending is also another one. There's a lot we could consider. But I think these 5 are important enough, but also easy enough to implement that we could do it right now. So Adam Silver, I hope this was helpful. These 5 things, if you change them over the next couple years, would definitely help the NBA. I'm sure there's others. You can read the comments. Everybody's going to put their rule changes, lots of other things we could get to. So lots to consider. Adam Silver, I hope you consider any and all of these. If you're not Adam Silver, I hope you like this video. If you want to see more, make sure to subscribe, and we will see you in the next video.